Hey everybody, this is Brian from Carving is Fun. Today I'm going to show you guys how to set up your own leather strop to get your whittling knives razor sharp. Now to make one you don't really need a lot at all. You just need a regular piece of leather. You can get these from between $5 to $10 each. Just get a block of wood to glue it to and then some polishing compound. A lot of these come with all the stuff that you're going to need already in like a little kit like this. The FlexCut Knife Strop. It already has the leather glued right to the block of wood, and it comes with its own block of polishing compound. Now you probably noticed that I have two different colors here. FlexCut has their own yellow one, and then the regular green one is what everyone else kind of has. They will do about the same thing. They're pretty smooth, but they still have a little bit of a bite to them. So they'll help take off some of the metal in very, very fine increments. So it's not taking a lot off, but it's allowing you to get that really nice razor sharp edge that allows you to cut through wood much easier. All right, so let's start off if you're going to be making your own strop. So let's get some of these out of the way so I have a little bit more room to show you here. Now if you're going to be gluing your own piece of leather to a block of wood, it's relatively easy to do. Just find your block of wood, your leather, glue it on there, and let it sit for a while with something heavy on top of it, preferably something flat sitting on top of it as well. That way you can keep the leather pretty even. You can do either way with the suede part on top or the smooth part on top. This one was done with the smooth part on top. Keep in mind that the rough side is easier to put the polishing compound in, but if you're doing it on just the smoother side, like this one right here, you're basically going to be rubbing it on like a crayon, and you can see how it's kind of going in a little bit uneven. Now there are a couple ways you can smooth this out. One, the way that I've done it at the beginning was just take your finger and rub it in. Since it's kind of like a waxy crayon, the friction between your finger and the leather is going to spread it out a little bit more. And you can see that I kind of spread it in there. And then once you get your knife, start stropping it, starts spreading it out nice and evenly like you see there. And then it's good to use. The other ways that you can do it is with like a heat gun. So say I'm putting this in there, and then instead of rubbing with your finger, you can just pick up your heat gun. Any ordinary heat gun will do. And then you're going to just slowly heat it up. You don't want to overdo it, just enough to melt it. But yeah, you can either rub it in with your finger that way, or you can take your knife and start stropping it in. And you can see that it'll start getting even. Now, if you accidentally build up one spot just a little bit too much, like I'm going to build it up right here, where it's like a little mound. Yeah, you can take like I'm going to use this one. You can take the back side of your knife. You don't want to use the front side because that'll cut right into it. But take like the back side of your knife and just scrape it off. And then you'll get it back to nice, flat, and even again. That way you have a flat surface to sharpen your knife up against. Now that's for if you're going to be making your own. It's relatively simple. I use this thing a lot, so it's my primary go-to knife sharpening tool, just to keep it nice and keep my knives nice and sharp. But if you're going to be doing it like with your FlexCut knife strop, I don't think you're going to need to heat it up at all. You can just take your little block of polishing compound and just rub it in there. Rub it in like a crayon. Since it's a little bit more rough on this one compared to the other ones, it's gonna allow you to just get that polishing compound inside of there pretty easily. You don't necessarily need a lot, but I like this, put it in relatively thick and as even as possible. Now, one thing I'm not really fond of for the FlexCuts Knife Strop is they have their logo here where it's kind of making it so this section is pretty much useless in regards to trying to actually use it as a strop with polishing compound on it. Alright, that's good for right now. And keep a hold of your blocks. They're always good to have on hand. You're probably not going to go through this entire thing in like a year or two. It's probably going to be a couple of years before you completely use the entire thing. But yeah, that's just an easy way to load up this one. Now it's got a surface full of polishing compound ready to start helping you sharpen your knives. So let's show you how to sharpen different types of knives. I have a couple different ones here. This one's an OCC Tools. It's got more of a flat grind across, so it's got a little bit of a thinner blade at the front. Then you have your regular FlexCut knives with, it's got a flat grind with no bevel to it, but it's probably not cut back nearly as far as the OCC knives. And then you got your other knives, like this is a Mora 122. It's got a flat, nice thick flat edge on it. And then your standard Mora 120, which is more of a curved edge on it. So we're gonna go over each one of these and how I personally like to do it. There isn't really too terribly of a wrong way to load up your strops, nor just strop your knives, but the key thing to keep in mind is you don't ever want to push into the leather strop with the cutting edge first. So like this is my cutting edge. I don't want to start going like this into it, because then you're going to start cutting into your leather strop. It's always lay it flat to the piece of leather and then push the blade away with your cutting edge of the backside. So I'm laying it as flat as I can. And it's good to put your finger on there and hold it down. Make sure that way you're not rocking it one way or another, or you're not accidentally lifting it up a little bit. I like to put my finger right there on the edge and then just push away. And that way you're going to be taking off a very fine layer of metal on that edge. And then it'll help realign the metal, and it'll also get rid of any extra burrs or anything like that. And you'll probably see right here, as I'm pulling the blade through it, it's getting darker and darker. That is actually the metal coming off of the blade and getting stuck on the polishing compound right there. So that's literally the metal from the knife right there. So it is taking off a small amount of metal with each pass. And that's how it's making the edge sharper. Now, if we're going to be doing your regular FlexCut whittling knives on your strop, you're going to be doing about the same thing. You're going to make sure that your edge is nice and flat. Since the blade is, you can see on here, this black part is flat, but the shiny part right there is actually angled up. So you want to make sure that you're laying your leather strop on the shiny part and make sure it's flat there. So like I said, make sure you're not wobbling too much and holding it flat. So make sure it's flat to the leather strop and then push away. There we go. Now you want to make sure you do both sides as evenly as possible. There's a lot of different methods to doing it. Some are some a little bit more methodical than others. I just go back and I do usually like 3 to 5 passes on each side, and then I'll flip it over. make sure that I'm doing an even amount on each side. Now, when you're doing this, sometimes you might run across where you might accidentally put too much like pressure on the tip, and you accidentally do one of these numbers where you kind of scrape it off a little bit and possibly damage your leather. Try to make sure you put an even pressure all the way across to help prevent that. Sometimes this can be harder to do, mostly when you're trying to do a curved blade, but I'll show you that here in a sec. But if you accidentally damage it, it's not the end of the world. Just put a little bit more polishing compound on there, rub it in, and just take your knife and work it in. It's not going to cause too much of an issue. I'm not too terribly worried about doing it. Just don't do one of these. Here, I'll show you what happens when you go against it. So if you accidentally do one of these, you do one of those. You see me cutting right into my leather? Yeah, I literally cut into my leather. Did that just for you guys. Don't do that. Don't pull into the strop with your blade. Always push away from you. Never cut into it. I'll be fine. It was on the edge. I'm not too terribly worried. Now, if you're doing a larger blade like this one, you can see that it extends over the edge of the actual strop itself. What you can do is angle it in there. So just push it at an angle, so I have the entire blade on the piece of leather, and just push it like that. Now if you can probably do it like this, but the way I'm doing it right here, I'm making sure that it's from edge to edge on my leather strop, and I can strop it all in one go. Strop it all in one pass. Like so. Pretty easy to do. Mostly when you have a flat blade like these, it is very easy to strop your knives. Now, if you have a curved blade like this one, where it's winding back and also the arc follows the edge there, you're gonna probably have to do it in stages. At least that's what I like to do. I usually do one portion where basically the only part that's making contact right now with the blade is from the base to about halfway up. So from here to here, it's not making contact with the leather. I will usually do a couple passes just in that section, and then I personally like to do more of a sweep for the rest of it. So I alternate, so I am pushing down and I'm rotating it like so, like as I'm pushing it across, I'm literally rotating from front to back. And since you're rotating it and certain portions of the knife are only making contact with the polishing compound and for a shorter interval than if you're just pushing, you might have to do a couple more passes just in this section over when compared to the other sides, but that's completely up to you. Just make sure you're holding that edge flat to the leather the entire time. And doing that, you'll get a nice razor edge on your knife. Now, how often do you have to sharpen your knives like this? That's usually dependent upon the actual knife it is, like for the quality of steel. If you're using a cheaper knife with a lower Rockwell hardness on it, like anything maybe, I'm going to say 58 and lower for a Rockwell hardness, you're going to have to really keep paying attention to how sharp those knives are, and probably have to strop them more often. I know the FlexCuts, they say that they're between 59 to 61, which is that perfect middle ground for where you want your steel hardness to be for whittling knives. They hold their edge quite well. I usually don't have to sharpen these knives but every 20 to 30 minutes. So while I'm whittling, I'll usually just stop what I'm doing. I'll just go and make it like about 10 to 20 passes per side. And keep the edge nice and sharp. Now, if you are new to doing this, there's a couple things you don't want to do besides cutting into the leather like I did there. You want that edge to be as flat as possible. You don't want to lift it up like that. If you start lifting your whittling edge and start sharpening it at an angle like this, you're going to start to mess up that nice thin cutting edge right there by making it broader and possibly ruining the razor sharp cutting edge that you put on there. So make sure you're always doing it flat to the leather. Also make sure when you're doing it, when you're pushing it away, you go and you lift straight up. Push, lift straight up. You don't want to push and then come back accidentally, because you might accidentally like nick your leather and cut a little sections of it away. So push, up, push, up, push, up. And like I was saying before, make sure you have something like a finger holding it flat. That way you're not accidentally just like stropping only one side of it and you're missing the entire other section there. But yeah, this is a relatively simple process, but a very important one if you want to make sure you're maintaining a nice, super sharp cutting edge on all your whittling knives. Like I said before, I made another video where showing you how to load up a leather strop without the use of any sort of heat, like this heat gun here, just by using your finger. It's the way that I originally learned how to do it. Go ahead and check out that video as well. I'll have it linked here for you. If you liked the video, go ahead and like and subscribe. I got a lot of other cool videos on here where I go over some of my favorite whittling knives and compare a bunch of them up against each other. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have yourself a great day.